Okay, so I'm going to jump right in for this episode. I cannot tell you how many times I see posts on Facebook or I hear from students who say, I've used every resource. I've used this resource, I've used that resource, and I still did not pass the exam. And look, I know it's frustrating, but here's the truth. Blaming the resource isn't the answer. And as much as I like to wave a magic wand and guarantee you pass through NBCOT products, I can't control whether you pass or fail the exam. All I can do is give you the tools, give you the confidence, give you the guidance that you need to be successful. But at the end of the day, my friend, what you do on exam day comes down to you. I want you to think about it this way. Let's say you're trying to lose weight, okay? And I give you a treadmill and I show you how to use it. I give you the best workouts. I tell you exactly what settings to use. But at the end of the day, it's your effort, it's your consistency, it's your determination, and it's your commitment that's going to help you lose weight. The treadmill is not going to do it, right? It's you. And it's the same with resources. No study resource is going to guarantee that you can pass the exam, especially if you're not using it effectively or if you're not using resources that are based on your learning style. So let's really talk about the real issue. Let's get real. Students come to me with piles of resources, books, online courses, flashcards, apps, podcasts, and they feel overwhelmed by everything. They've tried everything and they're still not getting the scores that they need. And the reason is because you're using all of these resources without a clear strategy or a focus, and it's just not going to get you anywhere. So it really comes down to what you use and how you use it. Just like the treadmill example with losing weight, the resource itself isn't going to do the work for you. If you're not actively engaging with it, if you don't have a solid plan, for how you're going to use it, then honestly, you're wasting time and you're wasting money. When I guide my private students, I always tell them, pick a couple resources and use them well, because having too many options can lead to confusion and fluctuating scores. Now, with all that being said, we have to make sure that we're using resources that actually help you, okay? It's based on how you learn. It's not just about grabbing every resource that you heard about on Facebook or you heard about on Instagram. You don't want to grab everything out there. You need to find the resources that resonate with you, that help you understand and conceptualize the content and give you clarity, because that's what you're going to need on exam day. So today, we're going to dive into all the different types of resources out there that are meant to help you be successful on this exam. These are the tools that you're going to use, right, to really master the content, to be able to pass your practice exams, and so that you can walk into the real exam with confidence, all right? So let's talk about the resources that you must have to pass this exam. And I always talk about two, okay? And one of the biggest issues that I see students using too many resources without having a clear plan on how to use that resource. And because there's so many options out there, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. But here's the truth. You only need two types of resources to pass this exam, okay? You need a resource for practice exams, the testing resource, and you need the learning resource that's going to help you reinforce the content and learn the content, all right? So let's do this. So the testing resource, guys, is probably one of the most critical resources that you need, because this is the one that's going to set you up for success. It's not only going to help you assess your progress and understand what you need to work on, but it's also going to give you insight into exactly what you need to do to increase your passing score. So it's about choosing the testing resource that's reliable, credible, and aligned with how you learn, okay? So let's talk about a few. Now, first and foremost, I will always recommend and be an advocate for the NBCOT study pack. This is an obvious choice. They literally write the exam, so their questions are going to be the most comparable to what you're going to see on exam day. Now, the downside to the NBCOT study pack is that their rationales are not so good. Sometimes their rationales are like one sentence, so they don't quite give you a lot of depth. So you're mainly using the NBCOT resource only to get a scaled score and to understand where you stand. And then we have number two, not the NBCOT study pack, that's number one. We have the TMPOT exam sim. Now, I'm going to be honest, of course, I created this resource, and I created it because I understand how the questions are written. I have literally been studying for this exam for 8 years, helping you and students like you conquer this exam. So the exam sim isn't just about answering questions. It's really giving you an understanding of why the answers are correct and helping you get better at content application. You also get like this detailed performance report, which tells you exactly where you need to improve. And then we also simulate the exam through highlighting strike through. You can hide the clock, you can sign up for accommodations. Like literally the exam sim is to help simulate the actual exam as close as possible. It's the real deal. I spent a lot of time and it's meant to challenge you just like the exam. Okay, third, we have TrueLearn. And I'll be honest, I like TrueLearn. You know, I hear good things about TrueLearn, but sometimes I question whether the writers, the exam writers, are actual OTs and do they truly understand the content, because some of the questions are just a little, not so accurate to me, but they do a really good job at simulating the exam and their rationales are in depth and they help you get a better understanding of the content and why answers are correct and why answers are not correct. However, TrueLearn does not give you a scale score. Same thing with the TMPOT exam sim. Unfortunately, we just don't know how the exam is weighed. So the only thing we can do is give you a percentage score and kind of tell you how many questions out of 180 or 190 that you actually got correct. But with that being said, again, I do recommend TrueLearn because they do have pretty good rationales. Now, let's talk about AOTA. Guys, AOTA has been around for centuries, maybe not centuries, but they are the OG resource that's been around for a very long time. And one of the advantages is that they offer retired NBCOT exam questions, so you really get a feel of what the exam feels like. And they're just a reliable resource. They're pretty solid, but while they are reliable, you don't get the same depth of understanding in their rationales. And also, just being honest, like I've been doing this for 8 years, and I just don't hear students talking about AOTA like they used to. 8 years ago, AOTA was like, top tier. It's the OG, like I said, but now I think, I don't know why, but you just don't hear students talking about them. Then we have Therapy Ed. And this is another OG resource. I mean, Therapy Ed has probably been around for 200 years, right? So they are credible. Their questions are very challenging. Students like to use Therapy Ed because they feel like they're over prepared. But personally, again, I'm just going to keep it real with you. Because the questions require such tedious detail and such specific knowledge, it can make you feel like you're not doing as good because your scores may not be as high. So while they're credible and while I do feel like they do a good job simulating the challenge of the exam, sometimes just the scores make you feel worse off. So with that being said, right, when you're using some of these resources that try to over prepare you, you need to keep in mind and take the score with a grain of salt and really use that resource to help you understand your weaknesses versus using that resource as like the end all be all. If I don't pass this practice exam, I'm not going to pass the real exam. No, it doesn't work like that, right? Use the challenging resource to help you understand what you need to improve on. So again, right, we have AOTA and we have Therapy Ed and we have, those are the OGs, the original resources that students relied on for years. But the newer resources like TMPOT's Exam Sim and TrueLearn, guys, we are starting to take over. Why? Because we understand you, the modern day student, right? We understand that your learning is different. The way you engage with information is different. So we really cater to how students learn today. We have interactive content, the detailed rationales, the feedback reports. It just aligns better with how you should be preparing. So again, it's not about there being the best resource. It's about understanding the differences in the resources and understanding that it's about being strategic and making sure that you just have a resource that's giving you a true understanding of where you stand when it comes to the likelihood of you passing the exam and where you stand as it relates to the strengths and weaknesses that you need to cover throughout your studying, okay? So again, combine some of the resources because I really do believe if you have 2 testing resources that it will give you a well-rounded understanding of the exam. Now, let's get to the actual learning resources. So the exam is testing you on your understanding of OT content. And you have spent years in OT school learning a lot of information. And at this very moment in your career, your job is to prove your knowledge. Your job is to prove your skills to be a clinician, okay? So the resource that you use to prepare to learn the content for the exam, this is going to be critical to your success. First and foremost, you guys know I'm always going to keep it real with you. We have to acknowledge that there is a lot of content on this exam. We cannot underestimate the amount of information that they expect you to know. But that's okay because we are medical professionals, baby, and we take pride in what we know. We accept the challenge, okay? So it's supposed to be a lot. It's supposed to be stressful, okay? But we're gonna reframe our thoughts and we're gonna go from, thinking like, oh my God, it's so much information, Kim, how am I ever gonna learn this? It's just so much, to it's a lot, but I got a plan of how I'm going to tackle this information one step at a time. Yes, it's a lot, but that's a good thing because that means I'm becoming a well-rounded, knowledgeable, respected clinician, okay? So in order for you to be the best COTA and the best OT that you can be, I want you to accept that there's a lot of information, but I know you can do it. And with the right strategy, with the right focus, you're gonna be able to break the information down into manageable chunks, all right? So let's talk about the different resources out there, the learning resources. And not all resources are created equal, my friends. There are so many resources out there. Some are good, but some are bad. There's also a lot of scammers selling subpar study guides, and you have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, okay? And you're using reputable, accurate, and credible resources that literally fit your learning style, okay? So let's break this down. Accuracy and credibility. The first thing you must do is ensure that the content from that resource is accurate and it's rooted in occupational therapy literature. Every single day I get tagged in Facebook posts, and you guys see me on Facebook responding, and I get emails and I have conversations with students just like you who say, well, Kim, this resource says this, and then this resource says this. I'm so confused, which one do I use, right? So when you're looking for a resource, you need to make sure that that resource is not using Google as a reference and that the resource is actually using the OT literature, the OT textbooks, and that they understand the information in a way that they understand it themselves, because if they don't understand it, then how are they going to teach you how to understand it? And any kind of lapse in knowledge is going to cause you points on the exam. So make sure the resources that you're using, that they're credible, that they're accurate, and that they're cited from the actual OT literature, okay? Because that's how you know you're going to get the correct information that you will actually see on the exam. We also need to talk about tapping into your learning style, and you hear me say this a lot. So, I really want to tell this story about a student who I was working with who had taken the exam like 3 or 4 times. And before you can work with me, you have to fill out your exam history form. So she filled out the exam history form and she said that she was a visual learner. And I'm like, this is great. But here's the issue. When she listed all of the resources that she was using, she was only using resources that required her to read, like PDFs, and podcasts that required her to listen. She was not tapping into her learning style whatsoever. So after we changed up her resources a little bit and we included resources that use visuals, she got a 40-point increase on her actual exam, and she passed the exam. I believe it was like her 4th time taking it. And that is the power of matching the resource to your learning style. Now, there's no scientific data proving that, matching your learning style will, 100% increase how you're learning. But honestly, if you think about it, if you do really well listening or if you do really well reading, tapping into that just helps your ability to engage with the content a little bit more, and it helps your ability to retain and conceptualize the content a little bit more. That's why I recommend a multisensory learning style. So instead of just using one sense, even though it may be your stronger sense, really tapping into all of the different senses to really help you understand the information and to just make it come alive. So if you're a visual learner, this means that you learn when information is presented to you visually. So we're talking about charts and graphs and diagrams, right? And visual representations of the information. And if you're a visual learner, you're going to benefit from resources that help you see the connection between the concepts, not just hear it or not just read it. If you're an auditory learner, this means that you prefer to observe the information by listening, okay? So you listen and you learn. So you're gonna do much better when the content is presented to you verbally. This is where the podcasts and the audiobooks and the recorded lectures will be your best friend, okay? So listening over and over again, getting that repetition of the information so everything is just clear and you just feel much better about the content. Now, kinesthetic is a little tricky when you're studying for an exam because you can't quite put your hands on the material, or you can't quite, really, get a feel for it. So what you need to do if you're a kinesthetic learner is you need to get physical, okay? I want you to incorporate movement, stand up and study, go for a walk, tap your fingers, tap your feet, whatever it takes for you to get some movement. You can also role play scenarios and act out the scenarios that you're learning. So if you're learning about hypotonia and someone with weakness of the core, then I want you to physically lean your body over and imagine that you're a noodle, right? Because that's what hypotonia looks like. And then when you're imagining and you're feeling yourself in that element of that, significant weakness, then I want you to think about what are the different positioning strategies, what are the different interventions, right? The different techniques that I can use to really help myself. So engaging your body to solidify what you learned is going to be key for you if you're a kinesthetic learner. And then we have reading and writing learners. And this is me, right? So yes, I am a visual learner, but the reading really helps me. Now, I have to read it 10 times and that's okay because, my processing is a little slow, but reading just really helps me conceptualize the information. So if you're someone who learns best through reading and writing, then making lists, reading textbooks, the NBCOT PDFs, taking notes, that's going to be your go-to, okay? And you may also benefit from writing out the key concepts and summarizing what you just read to really solidify your understanding. So what's the takeaway here? It's about being strategic with your resources. You don't just want to grab everything that's out there because your friend said this, or on Facebook or Reddit they said this. It's about getting a couple resources that are reliable and really using them to your fullest potential. And again, each resource has its strengths and weaknesses, But when you're able to combine the multisensory approach, you're going to find that you're succeeding, okay? So rather you're getting the NBCOT study pack or, to really understand your scale score, you're getting the exam sim to really understand your strengths and weaknesses, or maybe you choose to get therapy ed so you can over prepare. It's not just about having the resource, it's about focusing on the quality, focusing on, how they teach you so that you can have the clarity and the confidence to actually pass this exam. Now, we need to talk about some of the resources that do a really good job teaching you. And I'm only going to mention the ones that I feel are accurate and credible, okay? Because again, all resources are not created equal, and I always want to be real with you, so I'm only going to mention the ones that I absolutely trust. Let's start with the reading resources. So TMPOT PDFs, guys, I know I'm biased. I am the founder of TMPOT, but the results speak for themselves. Like, our PDFs are a game changer, and over 3,000 students have used them over the last 5 years. They are designed to break information down into bite-sized chunks. It's digestible, it's easy. We focus on the information that actually matters, that you're actually going to see on the exam. Plus, we use this very kind of like laid-back conversational approach because I struggled with processing all of that medical jargon, so I wanted to create something for students that no matter what your foundational knowledge is, no matter what university you went to, no matter how you process information, they're going to be easy to understand, and they're tailored to the modern day student who wants to absorb content quickly. Look, we do not have 3 months to be trying to study these super complex topics, right, that just don't make sense. We need to understand how to do interventions, how to help our clients very quickly so that when we get to that exam, we can pass and move on with our life. Now, there's also AOTA PDFs. Now, they are a great resource. Like I said earlier, AOTA is the OG of the field. They provide very solid foundational content, but I'm going to be honest with you. I created the TMPOT PDFs because I noticed a gap in the type of information, written information that was out there. So a lot of times I hear students say where AOTA material is just too detailed, there's too much medical background, it lacks the practical knowledge, it lacks the interventions that you're going to see on the exam. So while AOTA is super helpful, many students feel like they're not enough to use in isolation. So use them, right? Look into them, but I do recommend supplementing AOTA PDFs with another resource. A lot of students use TMPOT and AOTA PDFs side by side, and they say that it gives them that medical background because that's what AOTA focuses on, and then it gives them also the practical knowledge, the simple, straightforward, like all of the interventions that you're going to see on the exam from the TMPOT PDFs. And then we have Therapy Ed. Therapy Ed, again, OG in the OT field. This resource is used by many schools out there. The content is absolutely credible. However, Therapy Ed is dense. I use Therapy Ed preparing for my exam, and there were days that I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Like, the wording is not simple, it's not engaging, it's dry, it's tough to get through, and it just feels more like a chore, than, being super excited about the information. And this exam is hard enough that adding any more chores to it is just something that I am not interested in. So again, while, Therapy Ed is credible, just make sure you understand that it's more dense. Now, one of the best ways to use Therapy Ed in my experience, and I give this tip to a lot of my students who have Therapy Ed from their program, is to use it when you need to look something up. So if you're having a hard time understanding, a certain concept, or maybe you looked in the TMPOT PDFs, or maybe, you're looking through your textbooks and you can't find something, Therapy Ed is the go-to. You can look something up, that you're just trying to find, but just using it as a standalone resource can be very, very tricky, okay? So again, you have to do what you have to do. Now, I am talking about learning resources, right? But there are some testing resources, the resources that give you the practice exams, that have such good rationales that you actually are learning at the same time. So that's what Exam Sim, our NBCOT Exam Sim, that's what the rationales are designed to do, to teach you the content in a very clear, simple way. So instead of just reviewing questions and learning about questions, we actually break down the content so you can understand, not only why you got the question correct or why you got the question incorrect, but we really break down that concept for you. So when you see the material, when you see the content in another question, you know exactly what it is. You understand the information, you understand that underlying concept. Because again, it's not just about memorizing facts. That can only get you so far on this exam. You have to be able to conceptualize. TrueLearn is another practice exam resource where their rationales are really good for reading. They give very detailed explanations of why each answer is correct, why each answer is incorrect. So if you're a reader, these two resources will be really, really, really good for you, and they're going to give you a better understanding of the content, and it's going to help you strengthen your reasoning at the same time, okay? So now let's talk about the auditory resources. So the best thing about the auditory resources is that there are some really cool free options. Free 99, my friends. There are some free options out there, and I'm going to name like my top picks. So of course, OT Exam Prepper, shout out to Miles. Like, his podcast is so dope. Like, he provides you these really silly mnemonics that are, catchy, but they're also effective in helping you really understand and remember tricky details. So the mnemonics just make your studying more fun and more memorable, right? So if you're a good auditory learner, like, I really, really, really suggest that you listen to OT Exam Prepper. And then we have OT Mary. OT Mary is like, I don't know her, but just from her energy on her podcast, she seems like the sweetest OT out there. And her podcast really does break down information into bite-sized segments. It's very auditory friendly. Her videos give you like these easier ways to understand very complex concepts. So if you're an auditory learner, the good thing is you have two really good free resources that you can listen to that's going to help you pass this exam. Now, my visual learners, and this is me, I love seeing images and graphs and like charts that really break down the information and organize it in a way that just helps me conceptualize it. I'm a little biased, guys. I'm a little biased, but 450 Formula is hands down the best resource that combines visual and auditory content. Miles from OT Exam Prepper does a really good job creating actual images of the content that you're learning. So he really does bring the visuals of the content to life for you, and it just makes understanding it so much easier. And I mean, it's also just kind of funny, right? It's like this little green man, and the little green man is like doing all the different interventions and different things, and it's really cool. He also includes these diagrams and charts that just solidify your understanding. So, 450 Formula, it doesn't just focus on, those of us who are visual learners, but it taps into the auditory learning with the lectures and the mnemonics. And I'm telling you, it is just a game. Like, literally every student who has used 450 Formula, they rave about it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a guest lecturer on the course. Literally, Miles has created something that I wish I had when I was preparing for this exam. So again, the combination, right, of that visual and the auditory, remember, combining all of these sensory systems really make learning so much easier, okay? And then we talked about the kinesthetic learner. We talked about, really engaging your body if you're a kinesthetic learner. Now, there's no resource that, is using that kinesthetic teaching approach because, again, it's really hard to kind of get that physical hands-on experience when you're learning information through resources. But one of the best strategies for you to learn information if you're a kinesthetic learner is to act out the deficits. Remember that low tone, the client that's falling out of the chair because they're so weak, or maybe it's the client who presents with tremors, or maybe it's the client who presents with poor balance, or maybe it's visual neglect. Really act out the scenarios, and I'm telling you, it will help you tremendously understand the type of interventions and the type of strategies that you're supposed to be using for that type of client with that very specific impairment. So get up out of your chair, get out of your bed, and really get moving and acting it out. You can also try to incorporate like hands-on activities into your study routine. So like I said earlier, standing while you're reviewing notes, taking movement breaks, role playing with your dog, I don't know, or maybe your husband or wife, like whatever it takes, you know, for you really to get your body engaged and to keep the content very fresh in your mind. So I'm saying all of that to say, okay, it's not just about picking any resource out there. I want you guys to really do your due diligence. I want you to really do your research and identify, right, what are you looking for in a resource? With the first one being, I'm looking for a testing resource and I'm looking for a learning resource. So when you have your testing resources, really saying, okay, what am I going to get from this? Am I looking for a scaled score? Am I looking to identify my strengths and weaknesses? Am I looking to really get clear rationales? Because if you want clear rationales, then NBCOT study pack is not for you, right? But if you want a scaled score to see how close you are to the 450 or to the 600, right, then NBCOT is the perfect resource, okay? If you're looking for rationales that really teach you the information so that when you see 30 other questions on that same topic, you're going to be able to know that information like the back of your, you know, like the back of your hand. If you're looking for, you know, a practice test resource that really shows you a list of like, oh, domain 1, this specific topic, domain 2, you need to study this specific topic, then the exam sim is for you. But the exam sim doesn't offer a scaled score. So again, it's about really recognizing the advantages and the disadvantages to all of the different resources and making sure that you're combining the right ones based on your learning style, based on what you're looking for, based on what you need in your preparation right now, okay? So again, do your due diligence, guys. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. I recommended the top ones. I promise you can't go wrong with any of the ones that I recommended, and you got this. I promise you, you got this. This is just one hurdle, literally, to the best career ever. OT is the best career. I've been an OT for 15 years now. And if I had to take this exam again, if I had to take this exam 10 times, I would do that because it gets me to this point, right? It gets you to the moment that you've literally been preparing for years, and you're deserving, you're worthy of being here, and I know you will pass the exam.